Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a preview of this game right here. This is The Mix. It is published by Ruse Games, who's helping sponsor today's video, so a huge thank you to them. And it is designed by Gwim or Guime. I am not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but this is, I would say, a medium Euro game all about being mixologists. You are mixing drinks, which is very fun, with different ingredients, serving them to customers, trying to build up your skill level as well as gain experience. So if this sounds like something you would be interested in, then definitely stick around. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Also, hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. This game is currently up on crowdfunding, so definitely go and check it out if it's something that you think that you would enjoy. And without further ado, let's get into this preview of The Mix, shall we? Alright, so getting right into a little bit of an aim of the game, as well as the general game flow and all the components that I have here in front of me. And I will mention right here off the bat that this is a prototype and everything is subject to change. They are still working on developing some things. There is also a solo mode in development as well, which I'll mention that this game is 1 to 4 players, plays about 25 minutes per player, and is for ages 14 and up. And the aim of the game is that players are going to be playing as mixologist recruits at a very prestigious bar called the Foxtrot Bar. And you are basically trying to serve customers, improve your skills, as well as gain experience, and ultimately make your mark behind the bar. So this is a game kind of theme that I've been really wanting someone to come out with, because I love a good cocktail, I love a good drink, and I think that mixing drinks and that sort of thing is not something that I have seen in any games. But getting into a little bit of a general game flow of how the game is going to play, players are going to be playing in turns, placing out workers. This is a worker placement, kind of engine building, tableau building game with a little bit of contract fulfillment, stuff like that. But you're going to be playing over turns until one thing happens to end the game, and that is collectively you have served a certain amount of customers. For a 2-player game, that is going to be 9 customers, but in a 3 or 4-player game, that is going to be collectively serving 15 customers. So you are going to be keeping track of how many customers each player has served, but then also collectively how many you have served. So yes, that is going to be the general game flow. And then at the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points, which victory points are going to be counted around the outside of this board, you're going to gain victory points during the game, and then also you're going to gain victory points during some final scoring as well. And then whoever has the most will be the winner of the mix, and you're going to be the best mixologist at the Foxtrot Bar. So yes, that is everything for a little bit of aim of the game, as well as a little bit of a game flow. But getting into all the components here, which, like I said, this is a prototype, but we have the box here. We have some additional components for all the other players. I do have a 4-player game set up here, but I only have one of the players in front of me. The other 3 colors, so the light gray, orange, and blue, are off to the side. You have the other character cards and then the other shaker boards, which I'll kind of quickly start off with the player board here in front of me. You're going to have your own player board that is going to have a ton of stuff on it. Basically, it's going to have a bunch of different worker placement spots. You're also going to have a space here for all of your workers. You're going to start with 3, but eventually you'll be able to gain a 4th. You also have a technique tile here and a technique die. This is going to be your technique, and you're going to be gaining more technique as you get better at your craft. And there's going to be certain cards that you're going to need a certain die number in order to make. So I guess they are like the more difficult drinks to make. You're going to need a specific die number for those. You also have in the middle of your board where your card is going to go. Each player is going to get 2 cards. These are your mixologist cards. You're going to be able to choose one of the 2, and that's going to give you an ongoing special ability for the game. You also have at the bottom your setup track. So once you have placed out all of your workers, you're going to take a setup turn, which is kind of a reset turn in a way, but you'll go through a bunch of different things, triggering different abilities from the cards in your tableau, as well as bringing your workers back, doing a little bit of a cleanup / setup for the next day of working. You also have a space here for your experience tiles, Once you gain your second experience tile, that's going to unlock your fourth worker. Then you're going to be able to place it with your other workers there. And then you also do have a space over here for the current drink that you are making, and you have a glass here where you're going to be placing the different ingredients in order to make that drink. You can do a little shake once you fulfill that drink, which I think would be fun. It's basically just somewhere that you can place the different resources that you are putting towards a card that eventually you will fulfill. But that is everything for your main board. You're also going to have a little shaker board that you're going to connect to the other side. This is going to allow you to store some additional resources. You're also going to have your tip dice over here, which I'll get into what those are for. You can gain more tip dice. And then this also connects a spot where you're going to be able to place workers out in order to do the different actions on your turn. So that is everything for your player board here. Like I said, I have the other 3 players over there. But as for the main board here in front of me, it is kind of separated into 2 different areas. You have this area here, which is all of the cards. Some of the actions that you're going to be able to do during the game, you're going to be taking cards and placing them here. So you have all of the drink cards. You also have some technique cards, which you're going to be able to gain in order to build up a little bit of a tableau of abilities and techniques that you're going to be learning. And then you also have the score track along the outside. And then the other side here is some other things that you're going to be able to do. You have the supply here, which this is different from this, but this one here on the board is called the supply. And this is where you're going to be taking the different ingredients and placing them either into your glass or into your storage, but eventually these are going to diminish and you're going to have to replenish the supply from the store. This is the store here. This is like the main supply of resources. And this is when you pay the resources in order to fulfill a customer's order. The resources are going to go back to here. They're not going to go to the supply. But yes, that is everything for the supply and the store and the difference between those. But as for the other things here on this side of the board, you have the client track, which I've kind of already pointed out, but this is just going to be where you're keeping track of how many clients you have served, and then also collectively how many everyone has served. As you go up this client track, you're going to be able to gain different rewards based off of where you are. So you have that there. You also have here some additional bar seats that you're going to be able to add to your own player board. Right now at the beginning of the game, you're only going to be able to work on 1 order, but if you gain one of these, you'll be able to work at 2 orders at the same time, which is really helpful. And then lastly, you have the additional tip dice up here, which there's only 3 available, and you're going to be able to gain those into or onto your shaker board here so that you can gain more tips after you have served a customer. So that is everything for the main board here. Additionally, we have some resources. So we have the money. You have 1s, 5s, and 10s. You also have shaker tokens, which you're going to need to spend to do some of the different actions. You have penalty tokens. If you're unable to pay for certain things, you're going to gain penalty tokens. You also have here, lastly, the experience tile board. So you're going to be gaining experience tiles, a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And these again are going to give you some abilities that you're going to be able to use for the rest of the game. And you do have to take them in order. So you have to take a 1, and then a 2, and then a 3, and you're going to add them onto your board here. And once you do get the second one, like I said, you're going to unlock your 4th worker. So that is pretty much everything for the components here in front of me. But let's get quickly into an overview of generally how the game is played. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but I'll go through all of the different actions. Like I said, this is a worker placement game primarily. So let's go through generally how you take your turn and all of the different actions that you can perform on your turn. All right, so quickly getting into generally how the game is played. Like I said, you're going to be taking turns, and it's going to start off with 1 player. They're going to be the start player, and they're going to take their turn. This is going to continue until, like I said, the end game is triggered, where you have collectively completed a certain amount of clients. So 2-player game, that's 9. In a 3 or 4 player game, that would be 15. And I'm going to assume for the solo game, it is also 9, because typically in a solo mode, you're playing a 2-player game. Generally, but I could be wrong. I do recommend you check out the campaign if you want to learn more about the solo mode, if they do have more information about it there. But moving on to what you're going to be doing on your turn, you're going to be doing 2 different actions on your turn. The second action is going to be a may do or an optional action, but you're going to be able to do a main action, and then you're going to be able to do an additional action. And that additional action can be taken before your main action or after your main action, so you can do them in any order. And just for a general game flow flow. Like I said, you're going to be taking these turns with the additional action in the main action. You're going to be placing out a worker for your main action. And once you have taken all of your turns where you can place out a worker, you will then be taking a turn, which is your setup turn. And players will be taking these setup turns at different times, depending on how many workers each player has. So obviously everybody starts with 3, but eventually some players are going to gain their 4th workers and some won't. So those setup turns will eventually be taken at different times. But anyways, that is everything for a general overview of how the turns are going to be getting taken. But let's get into exactly what those main actions are, and then we'll get into the additional actions as well. So let's go through these 6 that you have on your main board. These are going to be always that you're going to be taking a worker and then placing that worker on that specific spot. Some of them you're going to be able to do multiple times during a round, and a few of them you're only going to be able to do once during a round. So I'll tell you guys which ones those are when we get to them. But the first one is going to be taking a client card. And this one you can do as many times as you would like on or during a round. And this is simply taking one of the client cards from the main board. And they are divvied up into 3 different levels. So you have a level 1, level 2, and level 3 in these different columns, and the lower the level, the easier that they are going to be to complete. But let's quickly look at an overview of what a client card is going to look like. So this is what they look like here. Starting with the top right-hand corner, this is going to be the level. So this card here, the screwdriver, which, fun fact, this is my go-to drink when I go out, is a screwdriver. Classic orange juice, vodka, delicious. But yes, this is going to be the level. So this is a level 1. And then on the left side here is the level of technique die that you need. So like I said, everyone is going to start with their technique die on their board here, and you're going to be able to, with different actions, be able to upgrade your technique die. So that is moving it up in pip value. So we all start with it at 1 here, but this screwdriver needs it at 2. So I would have to find a way to up my pip value on my technique die here before I could take this card. Moving down, you also have the illustration of the drink. You also have the title of the drink. You have the tools and glass that you're needing for that drink, which I do believe that does not play into gameplay. It could just be for thematics, but it also could be introduced with some other expansions or something, that those do matter. But also on the other side here is how much money you're going to gain for fulfilling this contract or serving this customer. Moving down below the title, you have all of the ingredients that you need for that card here. In the bottom left-hand corner, you have an instant thing that you're going to be able to gain when you take this card. So immediately you'll gain that. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is going to be the ongoing ability that you're going to be able to get and add into your tableau once you have completed this order. And then in the center, this is going to be how many tip dice you're going to be able to roll after you have fulfilled this order. You're going to take those tip dice, roll them, and that's going to be additional money on top of the money that you have here on the card that you're going to be able to gain for fulfilling this order. So that is everything for the client cards. So if you decided to take this action, you would simply just take one of the cards that has your technique level or lower from the display, add it onto your board. You would also additionally gain that instant benefit, like I said, and then that would be the order that you were working on. All right, so moving on to the next action, and this is taking ingredients from the supply. So like I said, the supply and the store here are different. But you're going to be able to take 2 different ingredients from the supply here, and these do not replenish until someone takes an action to replenish them. You'll be also able to replenish one type of ingredient when you do your setup phase, but I'll get into that. So I could decide to take this purple garnish here as well as this beige cream ingredient here. And what you can do with these is you can either place them into your storage, both into your storage. You could place them both into a glass, or you could place one in your storage, one in your glass. You can place them wherever you'd like. You obviously only have 3 spaces here for your storage, so if you have no more space there, you will have to add them to a glass. But yes, that is the action that you're going to be able to perform. You're going to be able to take 2 different ingredients and place them either into your storage or into a glass. Moving on to the third action, this is taking an additional tip die. So this is one of the actions that you can only take it once per round. And this is going to allow you to take an additional tip die from the main board. So you can see here that you have 3 available here. If there were none on the board and all other players had them currently, you couldn't take this action. But if there is available tip dice on the main board, you'll be able to take this action. You can take one of the additional tip dice and place them onto your shaker board. I will note that here you do have your own personal tip dice, which you have 2 of those that are permanent tip dice, but these additional tip dice that you have here, they're only going to be able to be used once, and then they have to be placed back on the board. So that's the difference between your own personal, is that you can use them and then they go back onto your board, but any additional ones you have here are going to be placed back once you've used them. But it's going to be useful to get additional tip dice for when you fulfill some orders. Moving on to the 4th action, this is the fulfilling an order action, and this can be taken as many times as you would like during the round. And this, you do have to, 1, spend a shaker token. So there's going to be a way for you to gain these shaker tokens, and also a bunch of different ways for you to gain these shaker tokens, but these are needed when it comes to fulfilling orders as well as gaining technique cards. You do need these. So with this action, like I said, you do have to spend one of those shakers, and then you're going to be able to fulfill the order that you're working on. So if I had this screwdriver here, I had all the ingredients, so I had a blue, a green, a purple, a gray, and 2 black. I'd be able to spend that shaker. I would discard all the ingredients back into the store. I would then gain the money on the card here. So specifically for the screwdriver, I would gain 5 money. I would be able to roll the amount of tip dice at the bottom here, which is 1 of my tip dice. I would roll that. I would gain whatever additional tip that I got, which I believe you can get 1, 2, or 3 additional money for your tip dice. And then this would be placed beside your board, and this then gives you an ongoing ability for the rest of the game. Moving on to the 5th action on your board, this is the 2nd and final action that you can only perform once during a round, and this is gaining one of the technique cards. So you're going to again have to spend 1 shaker token in order to gain one of the technique cards that are on the board here. So I could decide to take this one. This is double straining, so I would take this, and you have 3 spots below your board for your technique cards. And these are going to give you kind of ongoing abilities again. They're going to be adding into a tableau that are going to help you with your engine throughout the game. And additionally, with these, you do have an instant reward, which is upping your technique die by 1. So this is how you're going to be able to up your technique and get those more difficult drinks. But yes, I would take this, I'd up my technique value, and then I would place it below my board. And this specifically, the double straining card, allows me during my setup phase to pay $2 in order to move my technique die, which this is another thing that you can do. You guys can see here with the technique tile that there are a bunch of different rewards that you're going to be able to get once you move your die to that spot. So whenever you get the action of being able to move your technique die, you're going to be able to move it in any direction on your technique board in order to gain whatever reward that you would like. So I could move it up to gain 2 money, I could move it to the right to gain a shaker, and you do always have to move orthogonally. So I couldn't move it diagonally to get one of the corner rewards, but you can always move it orthogonally to one spot if you ever have that action. And the last action that is on your player board is the acquire more shaker tokens action. And this is simply that you would take this action to gain 1 shaker token, and you would add that into your supply. All right, moving into the other 3 actions that you can perform on your turn that are on the board here. The first one is going to be how you're going to kind of flush out the display here of the client cards. You're going to be able to take one of your workers, place it out here. This is going to allow you to discard the bottom row. You're going to move all of the cards down, and then you're going to bring out 3 more. So this is a great way to get different cards out on display here if there's nothing that you really want on display on the board. And I will mention that this does cost you 1 shaker token, and you will additionally get 2 victory points. And the next action here on the main board is how you're going to be able to replenish or refill the supply here. And this is a pretty strong action, which is you're going to place your worker here, and you're going to be able to refill and replenish all ingredients here. So whatever are missing, you're going to take them from the store, add them into the supply, and then additionally, again, you'll get 2 victory points for doing that as well. And then the last action here on the main board is gaining an additional bar space. So like I said, you will place a worker here. You do have to spend a shaker token for this as well. You'd be able to gain 1 of the additional bar spaces, place it beside your board, and then you'd also gain an additional glass as well. And I will mention with this is that you do have to be at experience level 1 in order to do this. And that is that you have your first experience tiles. That is one of the level 1 experience tiles, which you're going to be able to gain in various ways throughout the game. But once you do have one of those level 1 experience tiles, you'll be able to take the additional bar space action. And then lastly, moving on to the additional actions, quickly I'll go over these because they are fairly similar to some of the main actions. They are just additional action that you'll be able to take on top of a main action. So the first one is that you can take more ingredients. You do have to spend 2 shakers to do this additional action, but you'd be able to take 2 ingredients from the supply, and that would be your additional action. Another thing that you can do as an additional action is buying ingredients from the store, and you do have to do this for $5 each. So this would be an action that you would take if you were desperate for a certain ingredient and there were no more remaining in the supply. You'd be able to, for an additional action, either before or after your main action, spend $5 to gain any of the ingredients in the store. The third additional action works the exact same as the main action of getting rid of the bottom row of cards, moving them all down and putting out 3 new ones. And then you'd also additionally gain 2 victory points. And this additional action also does require you to pay 1 shaker token. And you might be wondering why there is an additional action that is the same as a main action. And that is because the main action of being able to replenish the cards, you can only do that once per round, but you can do an additional replenish of the cards once per round with that additional action. And then lastly, the fourth additional action that you can take is purchasing shaker tokens as well for $5 each. All right, so now that we know all of the actions that you're going to be taking throughout the game, whether those are main actions or additional actions, let's get into the setup turn. So like I said, once you have placed out all of your workers and you can no longer take a turn where you place a worker and do an action, you must take a setup turn, and these are the steps that you have to follow for that. So like I said, here on your own player board, you do have a little track here that you're going to be going through and doing the different things for that setup turn. So on your setup turn, you will move your cube forward, you will do an action, you'll move it forward, do another action. This is just so you're going to be able to know exactly the different steps that you're going to be going through when you do your setup turn. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to activate all of the abilities on your completed client cards. So like I said, with this one, you have an ability that you get 3 coins. So you'll go through all of your completed client cards. You'll get everything from those in the bottom right hand corner. You'll go to the next spot here. That is that you're going to be able to activate all of your bar spaces. So your first one here gets you 1 coin, 1 shaker, and 1 victory point, whereas these get you different abilities at the bottom here. So each of these do have an additional ability at the bottom. So I do believe when you gain a bar space, you can go through and decide on the one that you would like. So this one here, for example, would get me a second shaker. This one would get me 2 more coins, an additional victory point, as well as this one here would allow me to, I believe, gain 1 ingredient from the store. The third action is that you're going to be able to activate all of your technique cards. So you guys can really see with this setup phase, this is when you're going to be able to kind of trigger your engine or work your engine. So you're going to be able to trigger all of these things that you've gained and placed into your tableau. So your customers, your bar seats, your techniques, you're going to be able to trigger all of those, gain things to prepare you for that next round. But moving on to the fourth thing, this is the upkeep. So you do have to pay for some upkeep. The first thing is you're going to have to pay for each of your bar spaces. So the one on your board here is going to cost 2 coins, and then additional ones here will cost you 2 additional coins. If you have a third technique card, that's going to cost you 2 coins. And then if you have a third ingredient in your storage here, that is also going to cost you 2 coins. So you do have to pay for things during your setup, and if you're unable to pay for anything, you will have to take a penalty token for each thing that you can't pay for. The fifth square here is for any additional things that you have to do with some different expansions, which I'm going to pass on that because we're not going over expansions. And then lastly, you're going to retrieve all of your mixologists, place them back on your board, and then you'll be able to choose 1 ingredient type from the supply to replenish. And once you are finished with your setup turn, your next turn would then be starting another day and starting to place out all your workers again. And this would continue, like I said, until the end game triggers, which is the certain amount of clients being collectively completed. And then you would move into some final scoring. So let's get into that. So throughout the game, you are going to be gaining victory points for various things, placing your workers on various actions, different things like that. but you will also do some final scoring. So the first thing you're going to gain victory points for are your leftover money. So every 2 money you have is worth 1 victory point. Every shaker that you have left over at the end of the game is worth 1 victory point. Every remaining ingredient that you have, either in your storage or in an incompleted client order, that would be worth 1 victory point as well. You'll also look at your technique die and gain victory points based off of your technique die value. So if you are able to get it up to a 6, the highest technique that you can get, you would gain 6 victory points for that. And then the last thing that you're going to be able to get victory points for are these cards here, which you might have been looking at these the entire video. These are public objectives that you're going for, and you're going to be able to get victory points based off of these here. These are the collection cards, and basically you're going to get victory points based off of how many of each thing you're going to be able to do throughout the game. So this here is your experience. So if you got 1 experience tile, you'll get 4 victory points. 2 is 10. If you're able to get all 3 experience tiles, you'd get 16 victory points for that. You also have clients, so depending on how many clients you fulfilled, starting with 1 all the way to 5, you would gain 4 victory points, 8 victory points, 12, 18, and then 24 if you're able to fulfill 5 different clients. And then lastly here, you have techniques. So this is if you're able to get 1, 2, or 3 technique cards, you'd gain 4, 10, or 16 victory points there. So that is just collecting the different things throughout the game. You'll be able to get endgame victory points for those. And then lastly, any of the penalty tokens that you have at the end of the game are going to be -1 victory point. Once you were finished with all of that final scoring, you would look to see who has the most victory points, and that would be the winner of the mix. All right, friends, so that is going to be everything for today's video. That is the preview of the mix. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and hopefully this video gave you a better look at how the game is played, if it's something that you would enjoy and something that you want to add to your collection. So yes, a huge thank you to Ruse Games again for sponsoring today's video. I appreciate it so, so much. If you guys did enjoy, please give this video a big thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. I love you guys so, so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends.